Okay, welcome to the Cannafyl group, and today's topic is going to be about cannabis, and that is seed to shelf. Now, it's kind of interesting that this conversation would even come up, but seed to shelf for cannabis is an interesting conversation because cannabis has really kind of left the limelight for a while. Cannabis has been around, and they have it dated back as far as 3,000 years. And a little bit more about the cannabis timeline. Western medicine picked up cannabis in 1839. And then the US got a hold of it and heavily taxed it in 1937. And then the US again added it to the Controlled Substance Act in 1970, and this is where cannabis disappeared. Now, there's lots of reasons why, but we can't get into that today because that's not part of today's subject. But then it was removed from the list in 2018 and has really showed up in the market, and consumers are grateful for it. There's still a lot of gray areas. It's still not being regulated the way it could be. But nevertheless, understanding seed to shelf for a product that has had such an impact on people's lives, I think is a pretty cool topic to share today. So that's how we're going to go today. Now, the first part of today's conversation is going to be about understanding the difference between the hemp plant and the marijuana plant. A lot of people, because it's not been around, and when it was around, our generations, it was more like, well, it was cannabis, it was marijuana, it had a stigma behind it. Well, let's make sure we can clarify between hemp and marijuana. They are both in the cannabis family, much like a lemon and an orange are in the citrus family, but they are completely different plants. All right, so that's the family of the plant. Now, the appearances are also equally really different. The marijuana plant is a fairly short, stocky, full of leaves and buds and so forth. And this plant gets to about 5 feet tall, at its peak. Again, all the leaves are very close to the ground. The hemp plant, on the other hand, is very long. It can get up to 12 feet. Commonly right in there between the 8 and 10 foot place, and has a lot less leaves, a lot of stalk. And if you think about it, the makeup of the biggest difference between these two plants, outside of the obvious how they look, is the marijuana plant with abundance of leaves and flowers and being very close to the ground needed a protective system. And so it developed a lot of a compound that as THC, because if a plant were to eat, if an animal were to eat this plant, then they would become subdued and then possibly be somebody else's dinner. Whereas the hemp plant looked like a very long, tall weed and didn't really need to protect itself. It didn't produce a lot of THC. Hence why CBD became so popular, is because the hemp plant made so much of it and had so much of it, but it had very little THC. So we were able to consume that CBD without the consequences of a psychoactive reaction. All right, now that we have a good clarity on the difference between these two plants in the cannabis family, let's talk about their life cycle. Okay, so we start with growing. You might have seen that the word cloning. So there's either a natural seed or a cloning process. Now, a cloning process would be favored. It's a little bit more work, but once you've dialed in the best outcome of this plant, the best thing to do is take a clipping of it and plant that clipping. All right, so when you hear, cloning or natural seed, that is the difference between those two. Now, there are thousands of variations of seeds these days, and the biggest driver of that many is the mix of cannabinoids. This strain of seeds has produced a high THC, or this strain of seeds has produced in the hemp plant a high amount of CBD and also a good amount of CBG. So it really is dependent on the grower being artistic and how they want their crop, who their audience is going to be. And they can literally plant and grow this starting with the seed to accomplish that. Now, other things about the seed that's interesting, USDA is the regulatory entity that has been tasked with regulating the cannabis market at the cultivating stage. Not FDA. FDA picks it up once it enters into the supply chain and on its way to the manufacturer. But USDA holds that area and the farming part. So they have a pretty stringent practice regarding testing of the seed, testing of the ground, and testing of the water. Now, mostly the testing of the water favors also the farmer. They want to make sure that their water quality and their soil quality is of a certain standard, so they have a good crop outcome. But the seed, 100%, is USDA measuring it for a maximum percentage of THC outcome. Now, soil, the type of soil in which cannabis grows best in, it is regional in the United States. Its areas are where the soil is rich in organic material and highly fertile. So you might see that in Northern California, on the East Coast, the northern states, up in the mountains of Colorado and Oregon. All right, those are very common areas where you're going to see the hemp growing the most. Also, I should tell you that once the plant is growing and before it can be harvested, USDA also has another function of testing. And they do that as a courtesy to the cultivator, to the farmer, so that he or she doesn't have to waste any energy in harvesting the crop if the plant tissue does not pass the THC minimum. All right, so there's USDA there again, and they have to do this at each crop. And the cultivator cannot harvest that crop unless it passes that test. Now, we also have heard about cannabis being grown indoors. So the question is, indoors or outdoors? Well, so here's the answer. So outdoors is the best eco-friendly way to grow cannabis. Now, if we just talk about the hemp plant has the ability to clean your soil. So very extremely eco-friendly there. The hemp plant also, because of its size and the amount of raw material you need to process the CBD extraction is large, so very difficult, not very cost effective to do it indoors. Instead, you want to locate it in their region where it grows. Now move over to the marijuana side, the THC side. Indoors can be favorable because you can plant or grow this crop year round. 2, you can control the growth factors. And for cannabis grower enthusiasts, being able to control those alters the outcome. So indoors or outdoors, they both can produce hemp quite well. Let's go to harvesting. Now, first we want to recognize that hemp has about a 5 to 10 week life cycle. It grows very fast. If you think about the weeds in your yard, that's pretty much how hemp is. In the cannabis family, it's that rapid growth, gets big quick. So, and now on the other hand, the marijuana side of the cannabis family, that life cycle is a little bit more like 8 to 12 months. All right, now, once you are ready to harvest this crop, and again, there's skills that are needed to be able to do that well. And by the way, I have experience in some of this, or at least similar crops. So I recognize some of the tasks they have to do. Once the crop has reached its maturity, then you have to cut it and you have to turn it upside down, or you have to hang it upside down for a stage of drying. Now, often that drying is usually anywhere from 5 to 10 days, because the next step is trimming, and some farmers have found that they can preserve the THC if the plant is not quite fully dried. But again, each farmer will have a unique view of this, a unique perspective of this, and it may also have their region may have an impact on this too. So we have the crop now that is ready to harvest. You'll have either machinery or people will go in there and they'll chop the plant off at the bottom. They'll then find a way to bind it to a stick or something, and they'll invert it and hang it in a barn for a drying process. Once that is done, then they'll remove that from their hanging position and bring it down so they can remove the leaves and the flowers from the stalk. They'll separate those two. Now, in the cannabis, generally that's just remove it all in one fell sweep. When you come to the marijuana side of the house, there is a selective process about which leaves to remove and bundle them separately because they'll have different values. All right, and again, we come to another time where the USDA wants to do another tissue sampling before it is released out into the market, because the next step this plant goes to is extraction. So that is one of the main customers of the cannabis cultivator. And now we're not talking about industrial hemp. That's a completely different vertical. We're only talking about CBD related hemp products. So usually it is the extractor who tells the farmer what mix of CBD they would like, what mix of other cannabinoids they would like to, because they're the ones that are talking to the end user, or for them, which that's the manufacturer. And the manufacturer's talking to the retailers and the consumers, so they know what the market is asking for. So that's the supply chain lineup. So once this biomass, like I said, big bundles of dried up leaves, gets sent to an extractor, that extractor then can use a couple of different techniques to pull the resin, the oil-based resin, out of that plant, leaving all the green biomass to the side. So, and that just gets put back into the earth, and to help revitalize the soil. All right, so there are a couple types of extraction. A solvent-based one using butane, propanes, and ethanols. It's an easier process, but if not done well, can leave signs of solvent behind in the end product. So that's not always the favored. And probably the most preferred method is, it started out with CO2 extraction. Now we have moved to a more extensive type of extraction that actually under pressure turns CO2 into liquid. Now, what is CO2? CO2 is what you exhale, what does humans exhale when we breathe. Okay, now we prefer this method because it's very eco-friendly. Of course, obviously. It's something very natural in the environment, and we have it. So there's no danger to the producers or the extractors, nor is there any danger to us. Doesn't leave any chemicals behind. So if you hear CO2 extraction, that is the preferred. Once that is done, again, it is up to the extractor facility then to create a COA. Now, USDA is no longer involved. Now, FDA is involved. FDA does not have a requirement here, but an established manufacturer will not buy an extracted product from an extractor without the presence of a COA. So they want to know that they are in this concentrated product doesn't have any presence of pesticides, solvents, heavy metals. Those are the big things that they're going to be looking for. The other thing that's important to the manufacturer is that this product has a certain potency of cannabinoids. So it is then up to the extractor facility to do a final COA, which is a certificate of analysis from a third party before it leaves their facility. So let's count this up. This product has been tested now 3 times before it even got to the manufacturer. All right. Now, one thing I did not talk about is I've had the question that has been asked to me, can a CBD product be labeled as organic? And the answer to that question is it cannot. So the USDA, who is the one that gives the product its title of organic, cannot give it to hemp products yet, or cannabis products in whole. They're not allowed to yet. So, but that doesn't mean a grower can't practice organic practices. So I want to make sure that I got a chance to clear that up for you, okay? So again, cannabis products are not allowed to be certified as organic yet. Okay, now let's move over. Now we have a COA, we have a product that met with the manufacturer's needs or requirements, and that product comes in at a very viscous, very concentrated oil. And that oil also has the ability to crystallize, so at times the manufacturer might get it as a concentrated oil, and they also might get it as a very rigid, crystallized product. Okay, so once it hits the manufacturer, then the manufacturer has a couple of roles. First and foremost, they need to be in charge of the formulation of the end product. This formulation just needs to follow a simple guidelines. It has to approach the efficacy of the condition it's trying to create it for. It needs to be compliant, and it needs to have stability testing. Stability testing is once it leaves the facilities, it needs to be able to withstand temperature, withstand time, and other things in the environment that might alter it. Okay, once the formulation has been set, now we're ready for procurement. Procurement means acquiring all the ingredients that will go with this. You know some of these, there's carrier oils, you know there are sometimes flavors, there are essential oils that can go in this product, there are terpenes and other phytomaterials that can go in those. So we want to acquire all of those ingredients. And then finally we go to the assembly of these ingredients. Now the reason these products aren't always made at home because for this product to be done really well, it's not really something you can do at home. There is some scientific equipment that has evolved over the years, and really good products require a heavy capitalization of equipment. Now, we also want to be able to follow the current GMP. That is FDA's stamp of good manufacturing practices. So that's all during the assembly of the product, and then we move to packaging. And then finally, we move to fulfillment. Fulfillment is once the product has been produced, put in its packaging, then somebody makes an order, or a wholesale company, like a retail store will make an order, and this is when we put that product in a box and ship it out. Now, I should tell you, there's another question. Can I order CBD products? So you should know this, that the federal government 3 years ago, made it federally legal for a manufacturer to distribute CBD to all 50 states. So that's a conclusive answer. There's no wiggle room about it. However, there are still a few states out there that have conditional approval of CBD. So sometimes you might want to find out from them what your current state's conditional rules might be. Might be a level of THC. Maybe it can't exceed a certain amount. All right, now we go to, after the product has been made, we go to our testing part of this process. That's where we go to a third party approved lab facility, and we get the products again tested by batch for solvents, pesticides, heavy metals, and potencies. And potencies are, I think, pretty important to you as a consumer, because if the bottle says it has so much, a certain amount of CBD, the only way you will know that is if it is followed up with a COA, a certificate of analysis, from a third party, so that it's not biased. Okay, my last subject here is pricing. How did pricing get determined? Well, there are really only two components that have an impact on pricing, and that is quality and strength. Quality, things that can have an impact on pricing, is the ingredient selection. Did I go for fair trade, organic, for the ingredients that were put in there? And what were my preparation standards? Did I go light, or did I go with current technologies and invest good capital to make sure that the standards were kept high? Okay, you would know this if once you look at the product, once you discover the product you're after, just simply, if you're online, hit the About Us. If you're at the store, ask the appropriate questions. Where was this manufactured at? Can I just see the facility? What notable things would you like to, should I know about this place? Now, I know in a lot of good CBD stores, those questions are asked before they allow those products to come into the store. When you are online shopping, a little bit more risky, so you'll have to do your homework and use Google. Strength, of course, when we up our potency, well, we have to up the amount of cannabinoids that we put in it. Nothing else is really increasing, just that. And there's one other thing that comes to strength is actives will have an impact on strength efficacy. So let's say I'm trying to make a product for sleep. Actives can be materials that can be added to this product that enhance that ability. So depending on the level of actives that you put in your product, could have an increase in the cost of the price of your product. Okay, there is my delivery of the journey of the hemp plant. And again, always feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Specifically, if it comes to, well, what was the journey for the Cannafyl line? Okay, so thank you for watching today.